You're listening to Redesigning Reality with Dylan Charles and Jeff Anthony.
Hello, everybody. This is Dylan Charles, and you are listening to Redesigning Reality, the podcast. Super happy to be here with you all today after what's been quite a long hiatus from the podcast. If you've tuned in before, you'll know that it's usually hosted with myself and my awesome co-host, Jeff Anthony. And unfortunately, Jeff has been pretty sick as of late, and so for the time being, he is not with us. And so that's given me a reason to really reflect on this podcast and the purpose of it and the mission here and the vision for it and all that good stuff. And I'm decided to kind of take it in a little bit of a different direction. I've got a long list of really interesting people that I know who do lots of interesting things, with the one thing in common being that they've gone through some sort of deep personal transformation that has inspired them or helped them to become the type of person that then works to help others and serve the world in positive ways. So there's a lot of cool stories that will be unfolding. Today I'm talking with a new friend of mine. His name is Fred Terral. He is the creator of a small business called Pockitudes. You can check that out at pockitudes.com. That's POCKITUDES.com. And essentially what it is, it's a pocket-sized 30-day journal that you can tote around with you. And his story is one of overcoming crippling anxiety, fear, panic, depression, that sort of thing, and all the dark things associated with that, and then hitting rock bottom a few times and finally realizing that he wasn't a victim and that it was time for him to take control. And the tool that he found that helped him was being grateful, practicing gratitude. And so he's turned that into an actual physical tool that you can check out that'll certainly help a lot of people, which is pretty freaking awesome. But I talk with him here in the upcoming conversation. We talk for about an hour, a little over an hour. We talk about lots of interesting things, addiction, the guilt and shame associated with that inner voice, that inner critic, that self-reflective chatter that goes on in so many people's heads, and how to ultimately use that constructively to make your life better and to be peaceful and be a happy person. And that's really what life is about. So check it out. Here's my interview with Fred Terral of Pockitudes.com. Enjoy, and thanks for tuning in to Redesigning Reality. Peace. Fred Terral, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm excited to be on this podcast.
Yeah, glad to have you here. Thank you for joining us. I like to tell people, like to ask each other how they're doing all the time, and one of my favorite things to say is, "I'd be a fool to complain."
Yeah, absolutely.
I picked that up somewhere, and that's kind of actually what we're going to get into today. You have a pretty cool story, which is why I invited you on here, and you're a heck of a nice guy, so that helps too. But this podcast really is about personal transformation and just that journey from darkness to becoming the light that you really truly are. And so we're gonna have lots of cool guests on in the future, and you're the second guest we've had so far, man.
Oh
yeah,
dang it! Why am I not the first? I kid.
Because I didn't know you. I didn't know you when we had my friend Gary Cook on. Yeah. So, but I'd
be honored if I was number 100.
Yeah, number one. All right, we'll have you back. So
there you go.
You have to wait 99
Our
weeks.
Anniversary.
Right. If I can keep it up, doing a podcast is one of those things where it's it's pretty much a labor of love. Like, I'm doing it mostly for self-exploration and just the opportunity to practice my communication skills and abilities, and I've always really, really enjoyed having deep conversations with people, and the more I have with the more people I meet through all the crazy cool things I do, the more I find that there's a lot of ways that a conversation can help people. And I think that's really what the goal is today, is just to be candid and have a laugh, and with the aim of putting something out there that will find the people that it needs to find and help them in the most possible ways that it can help them, because we're all different, but we're really all the same, man.
Yeah, I completely resonate with that. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it, but just to add to what you said, at the peak of the darkness, if you will, a lot of us, including myself, want to isolate and be alone. And the last thing we want to do is reach out to people and be vulnerable and so forth. So I completely connect with that ideology, especially now when I'm more in the light of reaching out to people, talking to people, and sharing experiences. So.
Yeah, and what I'm finding as I'm really sitting here starting to organize this next phase of my podcast is I know a lot of people and a lot of really cool people that have a really similar story, and it doesn't just end with them healing themselves or making themselves feel better. It usually ends with them turning what they've learned and projecting that outward into the world some way so they can help other people. So in other words, something dark, something crappy, terrible in their past actually becomes something that they needed to grow and become themselves fully, and then they have to share that. They have to put that out there, and I think that's really how we all kind of grow together and help each other, which is outstanding.
Oh yeah, well, it's definitely a cliche now that I've been through this journey, and for me, it's probably 4 or 5 journeys, really.
Yeah.
But first, when you finally see the light, you become an evangelical about it, and you want to save everybody else. And so then you meet other people that are already, have seen the light, and they kind of look at you with, kindness in their eyes, but they're like, yeah, I know all this. This is your first time. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
we have very similar stories and just different paths, to get there.
I think some of that, some of that tendency to get evangelical about transformation, kind of subsides, kind of mellows out over time a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went through that big time when I got into politics and was real involved in political activism and stuff. And I thought, I had it all figured out and I knew the answers and I knew what buttons to push to make everything all right. And so I had to tell everybody. And no, man, I think the greatest impact I've had on people is just setting an example, just being happy and being present and just loving life more than people had known me to love life in the past. And that's really kind of what your story is about, man. So why don't we just get into it? Let me just bounce onto something real quick here. The story ends with you being happy and awesome. And so we'll go backwards in time, but being happy and awesome, but also you've actually started a pretty cool little business. And this business has the potential to help a lot of people. It's called Pockitudes. I'm going to spell that Pockitudes. You'll notice that it's a sort of a mashup of the words pocket, gratitude, and attitude, which I think is pretty cool. And what it is a small pocket-sized journal that you can tote around with you that gives you an opportunity to just jot down happy thoughts, grateful thoughts, prayers, meditations about things that are happening in your life. So as you put it, when you feel those gremlins in your mind,
right,
coming back in and playing games in your head, you can just whip that out real quick, get out your pen and lay them to waste with some good thoughts. So how'd you get to this? Just jump right into it, man. Tell us how you got to here.
Yeah. So, the short version is that I couldn't find a tool out there that kind of fit my personality. I tried other journals and they were, and practices, right, that just seemed a little too complex for me and too many steps. Kind of a hyper guy, short attention span.
What were you said tools? What were you looking for tools for? What was driving you?
I probably should go to the very beginning then, and kind of describe the journey and the process that led to Pockitudes, and not just that, but just to really a practice of grateful living and to dramatic lifestyle changes. So obviously it all starts with childhood, right? Without getting too heavy or deep on the childhood, I was just very sensitive, very creative, very sensitive kid. And very, very early on, I started turning inward and finding coping mechanisms to deal with pain and anxiety.
What do you mean by turning inward? Does that mean you spend a lot of time with yourself, or?
Yeah. Basically, I was an only child, so that.
Okay. Oh boy, there we go.
So by default, I'm just alone.
Yeah.
Just internally, in my own thoughts. And so that's kind of when the gremlin or the monkey mind, there's a lot of different ways to articulate what that is, but just the internal dialogue. So
sort of like a reluctancy also to speak about what's going on in your head.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I had no trust for adults. And obviously, when you're really young, you're not going to go to a friend and go, hey, I'm feeling a lot of anxiety. And I just want to talk about my feelings. Yeah. When you're in fourth grade, one, you don't know how to articulate that. And two, you don't have the wisdom yet and the experiences, life experiences to understand what's going on. Right. So this internal world I created was basically a world where the gremlin kind of is born and starts talking to me, and it's and many people can relate to this. This isn't a new theory, new concept, but basically this internal dialogue that tells you that you're worthless, that you're a piece of shit, that you'll never amount to anything, that you
that your hair looks stupid.
Yeah, that you're, and that's all that inward thing. Outwardly, no one would see that. They saw a super happy kid, an extrovert, the funny kid, the class clown, popular kid. I mean, that's what's ironic about all of this, right, is on the outside, nobody would know this. And this followed me through middle school and even through high school. And I have tons of experiences where I've had these great achievements, a soccer goal my freshman year in varsity, but it was an accident. So instead of celebrating the goal, that gremlin tells you, yeah, well, you didn't really score that. It was an accident. The ball just happened to hit your knee. So never celebrating the victories. And then, as you become older, you start building habits, compulsive habits to kind of cope with that pain. So for many, addiction's addiction. It doesn't matter. It can be sexual, alcoholic, drugs, whatever your drug of choice is. So compulsive behavior, any way to numb that pain, which a lot of it was self-inflicted, and caused by this incessant voice that's basically constantly telling me how you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't go for that, you shouldn't try this.
So how would you what would you call that voice? I mean, because we live in the era of modern psychiatry, and they've put out the manual on all the psychiatric disorders, and they've labeled everything and codified and taxonomized everything. And I think what we're bumping up here is what would generally be called anxiety. But in my experience, anxiety isn't really just one thing. It's often turns into depression, it turns into fear. It's a whole lot of things that. Oh yeah. But how would you describe it? Would you say you're mostly dealing with what people would know as anxiety, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been there's like you said, I mean, there's a million books out there that talk about that, but it was basically manifested as depression, anxiety is ultimately it. It's the voice that basically reinforces this kind of internal dialogue, this view of yourself, that you are worthless, that you're never going to amount to anything. I mean, as in college, I never imagined I'd be married with kids, because someone like me, someone like you, could never possibly achieve something like that. You'll never really have a good job. You'll never have a good career. And so this negative internal dialogue. And ultimately, for me, I discovered that this was a victim mentality. I was the consummate victim. And so as the victim, well, I'm like this because, I'm like this, this happened to me because. And so there was no law of attraction. It was just all about reinforcing how I'm worthless.
Let me stop you there, on this victim thing. What do you mean by victim? Victim from what? Who's victimizing?
Well, childhood circumstances, childhood experiences, and it could either be, for people, it's either parents, or it's either a bully, or it's a relative that had a strong impact on your development and how you turn out. So,
but that sort of manifests as a feeling of not having control.
Well, I mean, it's trust.
Okay.
It's love. Love can be manifested in different ways, right? So you could have very controlling parents, or you can have very physical parents, or you can have, it doesn't matter. And I think ultimately, if you're sensitive, as I am, I mean, I'm just a sensitive human. I wasn't very resilient. I wasn't very mentally strong. And so and I'm a creative. My entire career has been studying of creativity, and I've always been a creative individual. So it's an asset for my profession. But
Right.
as a young person, it can be detriment because I have an incredible imagination. So for me, I would manifest internally the worst possible case scenario that could happen. So if I go for this job, or if I go for this client or whatever, then I would manifest the worst possible scenario instead of doing the opposite, which is being positive, which is being hopeful, which is aspirational and all that. So instead, I defaulted to what I began as a super young kid, which was, again, that internal voice. It was my enemy rather than my best friend or my ally.
I recently heard something that was it was like a psychologist or someone talking, and he was saying that they estimate that the average person spends, I think it was 80 to 85% of their thoughts a day are self-reflective thoughts. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, if you're sleeping 8 hours, you're up for 16 hours, 2/3 of the day you're engaged in self-reflective thoughts. And so the challenge there is to make sure that you're curating those thoughts in a way that supports a healthy life and
absolutely
leads you to where you want to be in life. But it's so easy, man. It's so easy because my story too is so very simpler. I made some poor decisions in the past and got involved in drugs and this kind of stuff, and it ended up in like a downward spiral of anxiety and depression. I've still told a lot of that story on my blog and on the podcast before. And what worked for me, you had mentioned tools. What ended up working for me was martial arts, kung fu. I found out that I'm like an exceptionally physical person. Like for me, like even to this day, I mean, I don't know if it's possible for anybody to be anxiety free in this crazy state of emergency kind of world we live in. But I find that, I have tools as well. And for me, like I go out and I'll just go crazy and go running or just do a bunch of kung fu or go to jujitsu or something. And that seems to flush it all out pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and then you said it, I think anxiety never really goes away. It's how you manage it.
Right.
Fear never goes away. It's Eckhart Tolle, kind of embracing the fear. And I think it's Brene Brown, I'm not sure who, but dancing with fear, the idea of you recognize it. And so I spent most of my life avoiding it. Anything that I thought could set me up for failure, anything that I thought could be dangerous for me, and not just physically, just emotionally dangerous, anything that makes me too vulnerable or makes me look weak or incompetent or stupid in front of other people's eyes.
Right.
I completely avoid it. So the trick is, like you said, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but the anxiety, the fear is always there. It's just now I finally have the tools. And I think wisdom and age, mid-40s, I think that definitely helps.
Yeah. Thank God it gets better.
Yeah. I mean, I don't love everything about getting older, but there's no doubt it's definitely an asset, right? More than a liability, having all this wisdom. I work with people that are in their 20s, and I kind of recognize patterns and see that. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome. I've actually been through this.
Yeah. You'll get there. You'll get there, whippersnapper. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a comfort. I mean, there's no comfort in other people's pain, but there's a comfort in recognizing that you've come a long way and celebrating that. And that's the key, like giving yourself credit, like allowing yourself to recognize that you're human like everybody else. You're flawed like everybody else. You've made tons of mistakes like everybody else. And that's that collective journey we're all on. We're all flawed. And it's funny because I was just listening to another podcast about social media and how there's more depression and anxiety now among young people because they look at this, the personas that we're presenting on social, and it's hard to live up to that.
Yeah, lots of comparison happening.
Absolutely.
You have a quote in one of your videos at Pockitudes.com. I love it. It's short. Here it is. Today I dance with fear and I choose happiness. Man, that quote reminds me of something I read that changed my life a long time ago in a Carlos Castaneda book. He's you're probably familiar with Castaneda.
I'm not.
You're not? Okay. All right.
No.
We'll give you the full introductory breakdown some other time.
Okay.
Some other time, but kind of like a series of books on Southwest American mysticism, shamanism.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, very cool stuff. But the basically, like, the author, an anthropologist, goes out into the desert and finds goes out to meet an old Yaqui sorcerer, a shaman, right, and spends a lot of time with him. He thinks he's gonna find out all this stuff about crazy mushroom journeys and stuff, but what he really finds is that like the real power of this type of sorcery is done within the mind itself. You don't need any substances or anything for this. But one of the quotes that I took from that book a long time ago that's always stuck with me is he says you have to to be a warrior, you have to balance the terror of being a man with the joy of being a man.
That's really good.
Yeah, because man, I mean, life can be terrifying. I mean, I hate to.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I think the quote is great, but I also now that I'm about 2-3 years into this journey, this transformation, that I like to call it that, because it literally is that. And mostly it's an inward transformation. I don't think a lot of people on external would know that, because I did such a great job of faking it. I was a great faker. I was a liar, if I'm totally honest and vulnerable. But choosing happiness for everyone is not possible, right? So I do recognize that I have the ability to choose happiness, but some people that have chemical imbalances. So I'm always very careful when I even talk about depression, because I do recognize there are people out there that may not be able to just choose happiness. It's that easy.
Yeah, I've thought about that I've thought about that quite a bit, because in my past they've tried me out on different ADHD medications and stuff, and I went through this phase where they tried me out on all these like antipsychotics and antidepressants and stuff, and I realized that they were just trying this stuff out because they didn't really want to take the time to get to know me.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So in the, it finally was like, okay, this stuff is trash. It's actually a really cool story. I'll tell you about that sometime when we're hanging out. But I was like, okay, this stuff is trash. It's poison. And the guys doling this out are actually the crazy fuckers in the world. Like these guys are the unstable ones.
Yeah.
And so I put all that behind me. And like I said, I found the tool that worked for me. But in the end,
for some,
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, let me just finish that last point. The last point. My last point was that in the end, what I'm coming to realize is that there's a lot of research and whatnot out there about like depression and about like what the doctors always told me was a chemical imbalance. Really, what I see now is sort of a lazy way at doing diagnosis. I mean, they don't really know. There's no way to actually test for a chemical imbalance, but there are a lot of things that you can do, like changing diet, exercise, and this and that can cure depression in a really quick time. So I don't even really believe the chemical imbalance theory anymore.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, take that.
Well, the thing that I always tell people is that I can only go by my personal journey,
right,
and by what I've experienced and what I've done, and I find that it does resonate and connect with a lot of people. But I feel like I have to recognize that it's not a one answer fits all and one solution fits everyone. I do recognize. Again, I'm not a scientist or a psychologist, but I feel like I really don't know. All I know is that, hey, here was my story, inward, personal journey through this internal world that was so freaking dark. And it's funny when I see that Robin Williams and all these comedians, and you see that and there was this kind of this
incredible
this joke
faker,
that all the great comedians had really dark. I totally connect with that, because I really. Was me, right? I was the class clown, and I loved making people laugh, and I just naturally I do that. I don't know if I'm funny or not, and I don't know if they're laughing to be polite, but I definitely was that kind of outwardly extrovert, funny guy, and inwardly terribly dark. And it's amazing if you could project your inner world to everybody. I think they'd be shocked and horror. Like, wait, you?
Yeah.
That's not possible. How could you think that way? You, like, you're this, you're that, you're this, and I don't believe it. And then there was times where I'd have to say, like, no, this is true. This is what I think. And some people just don't believe it because they choose to believe the external persona that I present or that I presented, which was still authentic and genuine, but it kind of masked the true reality of the darkness. And I think that's where, I'm a big fan of Brene Brown's on, big level, the vulnerability, like when you're more enlightened, when you see more of the light, you're more comfortable being vulnerable and saying, yeah, I am scared. Yeah, I'm insecure. And, whereas in my 20s and 30s, there's no way I could admit that. I don't know, male ego, or I think it's just extreme insecurity, would never allow myself to admit flaws, to admit fear, to admit anything like that. I had to present this kind of perfection.
What is anxiety like? What does this mental state feel like to you physically? How does it?
Well, so elevated heart rate, this incredibly warming sensation in the head. So I have had in the past, I would have these panic attacks. So shortness of breath, you're like breathing like that. Warm feeling all over your body, and I'm not talking like warm as in, oh, that's nice and comforting. It's like hot, like where you want to jump in a pool of ice because you're overheated. And then trembling, and then, crying. It's pretty fucking dark, and it's ugly, and it's scary when it's happening.
I've really been, because I'm always, if you're living life and your intent is to evolve yourself, evolve your own consciousness, your awareness continues to expand if you're paying attention. And lately what I've really been paying attention to in myself is like the physical sensations of all of these, like currents. You can call them negative or positive or whatever, but just like being and like for the anxiety thing, for the depression thing, for that fear, I get it. Like certain things triggered in me, like looking at like corporate numbers and shit, like bank account receipts, like some of that stuff like triggers it in me. But I feel it as like this. It feels almost like a punch in the stomach, like right above my stomach, like right above my solar plexus. I feel this very like rock, like right inside of me, and I feel it sinking and hitting me. And I remember when I wasn't aware of what was happening, and now when I see that, I'm like, oh, okay, now I know what I need to do to turn this around. And that's really what Pockitudes is, right?
Yeah. And for me, I always used to think that, when the panic comes on, so first, step one is the monkey mind says you're a piece of shit. Okay, that's step one. Step two is you're going to be homeless. You're going to lose everything. Your wife's going to leave you. And step three is all of the blood in my body rushes to the brain to protect it. Like, hey, don't have a seizure. Don't freak out. And I think that's what's happening. So your shortness of breath, all that blood. Again, I'm not a scientist. This was all my theory. But yeah, so I think ultimately Pockitudes, and then I cut to let's skip 20 years. Pockitudes came from this enlightenment that I had. I didn't have a spiritual background at all, and so it was like, okay, kid, go into the real world, leave the house at 17, and then and go figure stuff out. And so
it's very much like my story. Yeah.
And what's terrible about that is that, and I don't think I don't think there's a answer. I think ultimately religion can do it. Spirituality of any kind can do it. And for me, what it was a series of just like, okay, I had an event that triggered this rock bottom, some call it, in the addiction, in the world of addiction. And it was basically losing a big client and kind of like, okay, so the business was, at a point where it's like, we got to make some tough decisions. And I really struggled to manage that, the stress and the pressure of being an employer, of being a husband, of being a father. And when I kind of came to, you wake up, you reset overnight, wake up, I'm like, I need answers. I cannot keep doing this for X number of decades. I cannot keep having this fight or flight and this anxiety. So what's out there? And that's where it starts. You read Eckhart Tolle. You get a little bit of Tony Robbins. You get a little bit whatever's out there.
Wayne
Dalai
Dyer.
Lama. Like I just start Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
Will Smith lately. He's kind of big. So I just kind of collect all of that. And then it came down to what I put in the back of my journal, which in the latest iteration of the Pockitudes is Frederick's tips. And it was these 11 tips that I kind of started doing. So one, meditation was a big part of it. Recognizing that, okay, this fear is not irrational, but how you're reacting to it, Fred, is not good. And this because you've done this before. So, Tony Robbins has this thing, and I'm not, I was lucky to be gifted a week with Tony Robbins. And
nice. Yeah.
I have to say that it was, a lot of it was very salesy and possibly a little cultish on some of the days where I was a little uncomfortable. But there were a lot of fantastic takeaways. There is no doubt that he had some wisdom that I really connected with. And one of them was changing your state, the ability that you don't have to wallow in the misery and be that victim. So, walking outside, running, meditation, deep breathing, anything to kind of control the monkey mind, I think was a huge, huge part. And then I'll give you a quick story. We'd go on hikes with my wife, and somebody would pass us, and they go, "Good morning, hello." And I had a lot of anger in me. And that's one thing I discovered. I was super angry. And that was part of that victim mentality thing and part of my anxiety and the monkey mind and how you feel inside, right? If you feel like angry and dark on the inside, sometimes it manifests externally. So while I was the class clown and the funny guy, in certain scenarios, like in public events or on a hike, I don't want to talk to humans. I don't want to look at humans. And so I would never reply. I would never say hello, good morning, good afternoon. Once I kind of saw the light, I realized how important we are to each other, how we are one, we are this collective, and it's not all cheesy, and we share this energy. And so you feed off of this energy. And so now I'm that guy on the trail. Good morning, hello, how are you? Beautiful day, it sure is. And that is one of the big transformations I've seen, as the anger and the rage that I have inside, which as a kid was manifested through violence, through massive screaming and emotional outbursts. Now, it slowly fades away. That angry, that angry Freddy, like that internal voice. I kind of named Freddy, and that angry Freddy. He's kind of slowly going away. He'll pop out, of course, if I'm tired. The thing about this kind of recovery, right, is that you got to constantly be connected. So if you're tired, you didn't eat well, someone cuts you off on the road, Freddie comes out again, right? So I recognize he's still there, and I'm pretty sure he'll always be there. But all these tools, all these aids, these methods, whatever everybody has that I've kind of adopted for me in my lifestyle, have all helped kind of Freddie kind of go away.
Freddie, I can't get over this. I can't get over this Nightmare on Elm Street aspect of it. One, two, Freddie's coming for you.
Oh man, that stuff just creeps me out. Well, my name is Frederick, right? Fred Eric, and so I used to be called Freddie when I was a kid, and it was great for me. One of the other many things I learned is kind of naming that internal voice. So if it comes, like if it's like I've got a big presentation coming up next month, and I'm nervous, and so I see little patterns coming back like, oh, you shouldn't. And then I just immediately, nope, Freddie. Like I could even say that out loud or just inside and just say, no, Freddie, nice try. Get out of here. And so naming it and talking, it sounds crazy. And that's one of the tools I learned from so many wiser people.
Recently I had an experience, some of this podcast is about my experiences with shamanic plant medicines. You and I have talked a little bit about that, but just a few months back, I did an iboga journey, and what I prior to the iboga journey, what I had noticed was that for all the self work and everything that I had done, I still had a couple of, let's just say, bad actors in my head. And I was able to through the use of this medicine, I was able to like really get just a very clear sense of like these individual personalities, and each one of these personalities, they have their own trauma, they have their own needs, they have their own demands, but they're also like performing a specific task. Like they're also doing something that perhaps at one point served you well to protect you in some way. They're fulfilling a role, like they've been hired to do a job. And so I would hear these voices in my head, and we were in ceremony. I was really, really just in a hypersensitive state, very alert and aware to what's going on. And I was seeing and hearing everything around me, but kind of hearing the reverberations of these voices in my heads and how they were coloring my responses to things, or how they were like triggering my mind to, oh, you should do this next, or oh, you should do that next. When in reality, no, I should just shut up and sit here and be still.
Right. Be in the moment.
Yeah, totally be in the moment. You don't need to go, prepare, fix, or, plan for that. Like just sit down. And so what I did was I finally got to the point where it's like, that medicine's pretty powerful, iboga, and it just got, I was able to hear these, and I got stuck in the loop of these happening, and I was so acutely aware of it that I finally was like, wait a minute. I'm going to do this again in a couple nights, and you guys take a look at your schedules. You guys are off. You guys are off that night, so you don't even have to come in and show up for work. And it was very much like I was, I had my team there, like you've been an employer. I had my team there. I was looking, I was like, okay, you've done a good job, but you're being laid off. You're out of here. You're fired, and the next time we went into that hypersensitive space, like they were gone. Like it was just, it was awesome.
It really helps. It helps to do that. There's no doubt. And there's nothing crazy about it. I mean, if you think about this entire journey we're on this little ball, is crazy.
Yeah.
and trying to make complete sense of it will drive you mad. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the big things for me is definitely living in the moment. But I'll say too, in the first iteration of the Pockitudes Journal, it was just all about gratitude. I'm grateful for this, me. Mm-hmm. And I was a pretty selfish person. And I think some would argue still are.
Do you feel
still
like...
am. And I think everyone on many levels is selfish, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think to be selfish at a level where it's so self-absorbed and so into yourself, in this third iteration of the journal, we added acts of kindness. And I say we, sometimes I'll refer to we as my wife, who is a huge part of my journey and transformation. I mean, if I didn't give her credit, I'd be a complete idiot. And it's not because she's not even here. I say that because she's been the most influential sage in this journey. Right. So I just want to add that. But adding acts of kindness in the journal, like your daily act of kindness, was huge because it takes you out of self. And that was big for me. The idea of doing something good for someone. And I'll give you a tiny example. I'd get emails from students, could you review my portfolio, or somebody wanting a job? And I would just ignore it because there was nothing for me, right? It wasn't about me. It's about them.
Right.
Sorry, I can't help you. So I would just ignore the emails. And then as I kind of see the light, I'm like, wait a minute, you were that kid in the very beginning, trying to get that client, trying to get a job, trying to find opportunities. And you remember how it felt when someone actually replied.
Yeah.
And so awesome. I take so much pride now into replying to every single email.
Yeah.
And if I can, to help people out. And the idea of helping others and expecting nothing in return, there's something powerful in that. I mean,
there's a cosmic thing going on there. I mean, that deals with your relationship with the universe. I mean,
totally, absolutely.
That's really like where you I guess that's kind of like your resume with the universe. Nobody else can see it. It doesn't matter. Like nobody else knows. Or, I mean, that's really how you evolve, is through service, especially like selfless service. But I do want to say that like selfishness, I'm coming to learn that selfishness is actually it's got a bad name. There's certainly bad types of selfishness, but it's I find that people aren't, they're not selfish in the right ways. Like there's ways that we need to treat ourselves so that we can be better people. An example of.
Can you explain that? What you mean by that?
Well, like if I'm not selfish enough, like my wife has I've been married 21 years, and we've been through this whole journey together, and she she has many times. Sometimes in heated arguments, sometimes in kind, loving moments, pointed out that I'm very self-centered, I'm very self-focused. And, at first I was kind of like, oh, okay, you take it as a jab, right? Like, oh, okay, oh, shit, I'm a bad person, like, oh no, I'm being fucking selfish.
Let me think of what I can say to you to hurt you now.
Yeah, but the more self-work I did was that I realized that, like, that's what she's talking about. She's talking about the fact that, like, I am focused on improving myself. And, like, like you can call it improving myself, but the reasons I'm doing it is largely for my family, for my wife and children, so they can have a better example, so they can have more peace in the house, they can have someone that takes better care of them. And so if I wasn't as self-centered or selfish as she pointed out, then perhaps I would still be, in those patterns of, just, not being aware, not being present.
I see what you mean. Yeah. So and that's true. There's definitely, I don't know if I'm 100% aligned, but maybe this helps it. There's no doubt you have to take care of yourself first to be able to give anything to others. So I totally get that if you're an unhappy person, if you're an angry person, then you won't be much of a partner. You won't be much of a father. You won't be much of a husband. So I totally get that. But I think there's levels of selfishness, and that's where it's kind of very, it's a sensitive thing, because it's like, well, I'm going to go, I really think that I need to go on this epic 2-month long hike in Patagonia for myself. Versus, hey, I'm going to go for a weekend in New York to kind of look at the art in some of the museums. I just need to kind of connect. I think there's various levels, right, of that selfishness. So it has to be put in check. And the best thing I learned, of course, is communication and dealing with resentment. I mean, that's another thing that I didn't know about, right, when I was younger. And I'm sure a lot of us are like that, this idea of the resentment that you harbor, that you internalize, that the monkey mind or Freddie then takes and blows up into something massive until a tiny little incident happens and then you blow up because you never shared the resentment. You never talked. So the whole vulnerability and communication, all of that was kind of foreign to me because I didn't have that as a kid, right? I wasn't really taught that. So that was a big part of seeing the light, is just managing resentment, which I talk to my team about all the time. I mean, whether you're in a marriage, any relationship with other humans, you can't let resentment fester. You have to deal with it.
What for you? I mean, it seems like, definitely with my story and many of the people I've talked to and had conversations like this with, there's definitely a moment that seems pretty typical. There's a moment where, most people would call it rock bottom or the dark night of the soul or something. Did you go through something similar to that before you discovered the tool of journaling and practicing gratitude? Yeah.
So it's kind of funny because I've probably had 5 or 6 rock bottoms.
Mm-hmm.
And it really took the last one in 2014, 2015, maybe 2015. I'm not good with numbers, clearly. But 3 years ago, roughly, there was definitely one where it was just, you get to a place, and I think anyone in any kind of addiction recovery, anything, knows that there's that one episode. And for some, it could be dramatic, right? You drive drunk and you kill someone. Yeah. Your wife leaves you, or husband leaves you, right, or you lose your kids. So, I mean, obviously it takes many. For me, it was all internal. I was just sick and tired of beating myself up. It was not productive. It just didn't make any sense. And so what it triggered is just me saying, how do I stop this? And what's crazy is that I lived my entire life with blinders on. I didn't even know about, it seems so silly when I talk out loud. But there are many of us out there, like, we don't know about gratitude or spirituality, about breathing, about connecting to nature, about being physical, forest bathing, about eating well. All this stuff that makes you a whole human, live a whole life and be healthy and have a healthy outlook on life. So for me, it was just, the rock bottom was, this sucks. I am so not enjoying this breathing, this panicking, this me dramatically going to my daughter's room at night while she's sleeping and saying, it's okay, baby. You'll still have a good life. It was, you look back and go, what the hell is wrong with, the drama. I think I was just done with the drama and the internal conflict. In fact, I think the great way to put it is I was sick and tired of fighting with Freddie. And so I was like, okay, what can I do here? And it was a lot of things. There's a great little book, a simple book, Taming Your Inner Gremlin, I think it's called.
Yeah, I saw that on your website, yeah.
Yeah, it's a basic concept, but it was a big concept for me.
What's the juice in that book there? Like, what's he?
No, it's just recognizing the big idea is that, hey, name this thing in your head, this internal dialogue. It's not productive. It's fake. It's not real. You're manifesting all of this. This is all your imagination. And if you're a sensitive, really creative, imaginative person, you've been amazed the plots you can come up with, if you have a fear of driving, for example, just arbitrarily throwing it out there, then you're going to sit there and imagine that, okay, I'm going to get in my car and it's going to blow up. Or I'm going to get in my car and drive and a plane from the sky is going to hit me. Or everyone's going to hit me. You kind of create these stories that are bigger than reality. And the bottom line is, for me, it had to be, okay, that's it. Whenever Freddie comes up, I have to tell them to go away. I have to stop. And if I'm struggling and it sounds so easy, right? Like, just stop. Stop telling yourself you're a piece of shit.
Shut up, Freddie.
Then I added a bunch of other things. So I go through, okay, what am I grateful for? So that was it. That's what started it. I'm like, I got to do more of this. I'm grateful for, and then, in the beginning, it's predictable. I'm grateful for my kids. I'm grateful for my wife. I'm grateful for the roof over my head. And then it really becomes like, it gets real granular. Like, I'm grateful for the feel of the grass on my toes. I'm grateful for the ability to step out of my house and go on a trail in the Blue Ridge, or back in Colorado at Sanitas. Or I'm grateful for this cloud I'm looking at right now outside my window. You become like, and it's super cheesy, but who cares, right? If it makes you feel good. Yeah. And so then it's just this. And then it's like, okay, so from gratitude, what else is there? Oh, acts of kindness. What else is there? Oh, just simply walking outside for 30 minutes. Okay, what else is there? Breathing deeply, meditating. Now, meditating is great because in the beginning, I was like, well, I have to do 20 minutes, maybe an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. No way. That did not happen. I couldn't do it. So I could do 30 seconds or a minute of just that breathing, and then all these thoughts come in. It doesn't matter. If I even do a minute and I got a good 10 seconds of quality, like complete, mindful meditation, I feel good. So it's the perfect marriage of all these little tools that seem so obvious to me now that were completely foreign to me then.
Man, I want to just back up again, not to beat this horse to death here, but that sort of that dark night moment. A couple times in this, I think like 2 or 3 times since we've been talking, you've already mentioned addiction. Yeah. But you've never really explained like how you were affected by addiction. I mean, what was that for you? I mean, in my case, it was very much like tons of alcohol. I started drinking when I was like 13 or 14 years old, and then got into drugs when I was 17 or 18. And then it was like, it was just full on. I mean, I was doing everything I could to, and it was fun for a while, like we had a good, it was like this rave DJ and stuff. And so there was a lifestyle around it. We really had a good time. And it's how I met my wife and stuff. And so a lot of good came out of that, and I use that story to help people in similar situations today. But ultimately what happened was like the drugs, that whole, like, it became like this secretive thing where I was always fucked up on something, and it didn't matter if anybody knew it or not. Like, I couldn't leave the house without, having some liquor in me, or have smoked a little dope or done some speed or something. Like, I would do everything, go to grandma's house and I'd be like high, and stuff. And it was just like this whole thing that I couldn't control. And that's really what seemed to like just kick my anxiety and depression into overdrive when it was and I'm not sure. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add that whatever the drug of choice is, and I'll share it with you, but it doesn't matter, right? That's why, I'll share, but it's completely irrelevant, because all of that is a numbing mechanism, because the reality and the reality we created for ourselves in our head is so horrible. It's so dark that I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with the responsibility of paying bills, of being a responsible human as we're taught to be, a productive, member of society. You go to law school, you go to medical school, like all these expectations that we're given and that we're told this is how you become a productive human in society. So fuck it, I can't do it. So you numb yourself. So my drug of choice was sexual addiction. That's, sex addiction, which is always the butt of jokes in movies. But there's nothing funny about it. It destroys presidencies. It destroys marriages. It destroys pocketbooks, bank accounts. It endangers people. It supports sex trafficking. I mean, it is a dark, dark thing in society that we really never talk about, escorts and prostitutes. And I mean, it's dark and ugly, and it's as bad as any other drug. And so for me, that's the compulsive behavior that started at a really young age, and be exposed to pornography at a really young age.
What I find really interesting about that particular addiction, because I've had the honor of working with quite a few people, especially young people, to help them move through addiction, using plant medicines and shamanic medicine work, and what I find, like with sex and porn addiction, it's particularly nasty. And I think the reason for that is because, like, let's say you do cocaine or something, you get the buzz, you do whatever, right? But the sexual addiction, the pornography, like it does so much more to create, like to situate you in a fantasy. Like, it's just fucking fantasy. Like, it's such a fantasy. I mean, And that's what I find is like it ensnares people more than almost any other kind of like physiological any drug that they can use to alter their physiology is that like that deep fantasy. And it just, once you open that door into that Pandora's box of that fantasy, I mean, as my friend put it, man, this is hilarious. He was like, just think about it, man. You turn on the internet and you see these two smoking hot chicks and they're going at it. And then this guy walks in the room with just a shank. And you're like, wow, that could be me.
Jeez.
And it's just really funny because he's right. And the point is that he's making is that like you insert yourselves into these fantasies, and when that like crosses the border into actually becoming real physically, then like really dangerous things happen with that.
Well, and it's never enough. So it's just like any drug. You need to get your fix. So if you're cruising the streets for a prostitute, or if you're surfing the web for the right clip, whatever it is, or if you need an extramarital affair and you've got to find that, if you need that fix, the journey is the same. So you're desperate for the fix. You finally get it, and then what happens when you're done climaxing or whatever, being high?
Right, you're like
you have the guilt.
Instantly the guilt comes.
Yeah, and then so not so in the guilt, then you have the monkey mind, the Freddy, the gremlin that basically says, "You're a piece of shit. Look what you did to your wife. Look what you did to your bank account. Did you really need to spend $4,000 on a trip to Vegas? Was it really worth it?"
Yeah.
And then your mind, you go, "Yeah, that was a lot of fun." And then the problem is like, you start out innocently, and then it's like, okay, well, with sexual addiction, in particular, then it's like, okay, well, what's next? I've done this, I've done that, I've done that, but I need something else. And so, then for people that are really unhealthy or unstable, that's where rape comes into play. So it's dangerous. It's devastating. It destroys lives.
Yeah.
And it really irritates me a lot when, you're in a movie, you go to a movie and there's the guy who's having sex with everybody, and it'll be the butt of the joke. Oh, he's a sex addict. Because in society among men, right, there's this thing like, yeah, you have sex with a lot of women. That's like
awesome. Yeah, you're
badge
the man.
like that's so cool. The conquest. And I'm definitely teaching my son the opposite. It's not about that. It's about
connection, man.
It's about connection and intimacy. Yeah. And if you go living your life, trying to conquer and conquest, then you're just going to be a miserable human being, and you're going to give a lot of pain to yourself and to others. So yeah, for me, that's the thing. Like, it doesn't matter what the drug of choice is. It booze, drugs, sex, whatever, furries. It doesn't matter.
Furries.
I don't know if furries is a drug, but it doesn't matter. Like, whatever people are dealing with, are using to cope with anxiety, with an internal dialogue, with pain, with fear, with never measuring up to whatever this kind of standard that was placed on us by authority figures or society or Instagram, whatever all that is. It's irrelevant. The bottom line is you need to find the tools that work for you. And I'm of the philosophy, I don't care if it's a religion, I don't care what it is, as long as you're healthy and it's healthy for others and you're not imposing anything. Like for me, like that's kind of been my philosophy. I'm creating my own spirituality based on energy and what feels right to me, what makes sense. And so, now I'm in the woods and I'll touch a tree. I never did that. And I try to connect with that tree. And I find that I just get great comfort. And my wife's been really helpful in that too. Like in this, again, it's not I'm not going to blow anybody away with this wisdom, but this concept that we're all connected, like everything is connected. I am so connecting with that. I am connected to negative, dark people. I am connected to that criminal. I'm connected to that child, that baby, that tree, that plant, that bird. And living that way is an amazing way to live. Now, I'm not like that every day. Certainly not, Xanadu here, but just having one day where I'm completely enlightened and mindful of all of that, I'll take that one day over living every day in misery, right?
Did you ever try like psychiatric medicines like benzos, Xanax, all that kind of poison?
Yeah, I went one of them, rock bottoms. I don't know. I think I was in my early 20s. I think I went on one of those. I don't do well with chemicals, which is actually kind of great because I did go through my little rave scene, my rave episode.
Yes. Glow sticks. You got your glow sticks.
Yeah, I did all that, and I explored, I experimented, and I am so lucky that I don't have that addictive gene. I didn't get hooked on anything or addicted. And then when I was, I woke up one morning feeling, and I was like, okay, I'm done. So I was super lucky because I have friends, or we have acquaintances that, are trapped in that now, or we had suicides, a mutual friend. And
I've lost several friends in the last few years to people who've never were able to leave that lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I did. If it's out there, I tried. Like one day I went to a Catholic church. My mom is Catholic. And so I went to a Catholic church, and I walked in there, and I'm like, oh, help me, I'm lost. And maybe this is the answer. And so there was this really young priest. I don't know what he was. I don't know what you would call him. I don't know. He wasn't the priest for that church. But anyway, he opens a Bible and he's reading verses, and I'm super nervous. I could barely read anything. I wasn't used to reading that kind of language. So it was traumatic. Yeah. I spent more time thinking, oh, he must think I'm an idiot because I can't read. But I remember, like, it didn't feel right to just read something that I didn't connect with or understand. I tried all kinds of different things, but the bottom line is that it was always superficial until you really want it. Right. Until you really understand where you want to go. Like, I understood my last episode, I understood that I wanted peace of mind, and I didn't know what I wanted before. I just wanted, I'd love a magic pill. Here, take this pill, and you'll be super happy, insanely successful, and married with kids. Sweet. I mean, who wouldn't do that, right? So that's what I wanted. I wanted a Band-Aid. I wanted a quick fix, a solution, that typical male, I got to fix it right now. Oh, here's the answer. Do this and this, and you're done. And that's why back in my Pockitudes journal, it's Frederick's tips. These are just tips. These are 11 things that I do at various times. But I don't think there's, in my view, in my humble opinion, I don't know if there's one answer for everyone, because I've met very religious people that are addicted or cheat. I've met, so I don't know if there's such a thing as complete and total enlightenment. And I'm sure many people would argue with me on that. But I think for me, it's the journey, and just being on that journey is a beautiful thing.
What's cool about, I mean, obviously when you're going through the shit, when you're going through the suck, and you're just like, wow, is this life even worth, tomorrow? Like, do I even want to be here for tomorrow? Like, obviously that sucks. But what I find time and again is, with my story, with your story, everybody, like, once you push through that, once you decide to take control and set aside the victim and tell Freddie to shut the fuck up, once you decide to take control and things turn around, like a sort of awareness develops, and having been through all of that stuff, what all that stuff feels like. So you can, I'm at this stage right now where, like we were talking about earlier, anxiety is not a thing of the past for me. It's not something that doesn't exist. I mean, it's a natural part of our emotional body, but I can use it constructively now. And so what I find really interesting is that I can feel it. I can see it. And I like to think of it as like it's the dichotomy of love and fear, right? This idea of expansiveness versus contraction. And so whenever I feel, whether it's dealing with work stuff or whether I'm dealing with something that's going on, with even if things like, if I'm going to a martial arts practice, I do some, it's pretty hard shit, like sometimes I'll get that contractive feeling like, oh, okay, but I can see these. I'm aware enough to see, like, okay, am I going into fight or flight, which is a contractive response, which is a contraction. How do I turn that around and expand? Do you resonate with that at all?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe not in those terms, but I think I go back to the concept of just recognizing it and giving it a name. So for me, I'm very competitive. So I used to do tournaments in racquetball, and I get a ton out of that. And even during a game where I'm down 6 points, I would tell myself, I guess it's a contraction you're talking about. I'm going to lose this game. Right. But then the ability to recognize, wait, no. And then you pump yourself up. It's amazing. It's something I could never do as a younger athlete, is the ability to go, wait, no, you still got this because you've done this before. And so context, I'll give you this quick story that at one of my lows. And I think I was on a flight to kind of tell all my employees that, hey, I'm going to let all of you go. Super dark moment in my life. And the flight was really turbulent. Anytime you're going into Denver, it's super turbulent. And I remember thinking in like a nanosecond, like, oh, wouldn't it be great if the plane crashed? Because then I wouldn't have to worry about this. And I didn't kill myself. Yeah. The plane crashed. Oh, poor Freddie. Poor Fred. He was a good guy, and then it would solve everything. 'Cause I remember that story because I think you said something that triggered that for whatever reason. It just brought that into my mind of the thoughts of like when you feel like there's absolutely no hope. And it's crazy because I could probably call a bunch of friends and share this story, and they would say, you? And literally I would get, but you're perfect. Like you and your wife and the kids, like it's perfection. And we get so uncomfortable with that because on the surface, it's like, okay, yeah, we're not ugly people. And, I've always managed to have a career, and I could see why others would call that perfection because I would do it. I would look at other people and go, oh, perfection. Right. Yeah. Whatever material possession they have, oh, that's perfection. And they're beautiful. And I mean, it's such a crazy game, and it is frustrating. I will say that all these coaches that are coming up, and they're all beautiful people and healthy and wealthy, and they're all like, hey guys, just snap out of it and choose happiness. I mean, now because of social media, it's getting really like, I could see why more and more people are getting anxious because all these beautiful, wealthy people are telling, and mostly, beautiful, wealthy, white, privileged people are telling everybody, hey guys, snap out of it. This is what you need to do. Buy my this, or that, and join my program. And you'll find happiness and beauty as well. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, spirituality and happiness and sex, those are like the greatest commodities ever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, the ability to monetize, anxiety and depression. I mean, that's not exactly a new concept. I can see the hypocrisy in me selling a little gratitude journal as monetizing. But given that, it's a tool that definitely helped me, and so I'm super happy to share it. And we have an event that we're hosting called Grateful For, FOUR, where and that's something we don't monetize. It's just kind of exactly what you're doing is learning from others. We hosted this event 4 times in Boulder, and we're bringing it to Asheville. Super excited to do that.
It's a live event then?
It's a live event. It's modeled on moth, storytellers, all these kind of storytelling things. And it's basically doing what you're doing in 15 minutes. Okay. We have 4 people come up on stage and share their journey. And it could be anything. I mean, we had someone that talks about, hey, I'm 10 days sober, very moving story, to someone saying I lived in like 600 zip codes and having the ability to remember from memory every single one of them. Wow. And what memory kind of it triggered. But basically they all end in their stories of grateful living and gratitude. And so using Pockitudes as kind of that tool to learn and continue to grow from others, like this conversation, I'm obviously getting something from it, not only sharing my story, being vulnerable, but learning from you and feeding off of you. And I love it when because that's the selfish part of me where, and that victim mentality that I had, well, I'm the only one that's going through this. No one gets it. No one understands me because they don't know how I think inside and what I deal with and the obsessive compulsive behavior and the thinking. No one could understand. And then as you see more and more of the light, you realize, oh, wow, not only are a ton of people like me, but there's a lot more that are worse off than me. Like, I've always had a job. I've always made money.
Sure, yeah.
Like there are people that deal with what I have times 10 and they're struggling to make a buck. Yeah. So there's something beautiful and humbling in the reality that you're the victim who has it so bad, but really you're not special. And that's hard to swallow. Like you're not special. And and we jokingly, there's a great viral video. And I don't remember, it was a high school graduation speech, and you look it up, it's got like millions of views, called You're Not Special. And we joke with our kids all the time, like, hey, I got this great grade, and we jokingly say you're not special, and they kind of now they get it, they get the concept, they get what we're trying to tell them.
My stepmother, I guess she likes to phrase it like this. She goes, you are special, and so is everyone else.
I love that. That's exactly it. Yeah. That'd be a great bumper sticker.
Yeah.
But it's so true, though. I think that was a big part of my story as well. Is like this idea of, okay, yeah, I've got all these little tools and tips and tricks now that I use. And whereas before it was white knuckling, now it's genuine.
Yeah.
But the idea of recognizing that you're not the only one on this journey, that is so beautiful, because then you're in a position to help others. And the way my wife taught me to help others is you don't solve anything. You're just sitting there and being present. You just listen. And I'll be honest with you, that is the one thing I never did very well, and I'm still working on that.
What, listening?
Is where listening.
Okay.
Whereas people would talk to me, and the entire time they're talking to me.
You're listening to Freddie.
So I'm listening to Freddie, who's telling me, commenting on this, or I probably should give that guy a call tomorrow, and like not being present. And now being present is a beautiful gift, not only to yourself but to others, and just listening and not doing the guy thing, which was me, where, okay, I know nothing of this topic, let me solve it. What you want to do is it's like, wait, well, how do you know this answer? Well, I'm an intuitive guy, I'm pretty smart, it seems logical. Bullshit.
Man, let me ask you like one more thing. There's I was thinking about this the other day. It's kind of interesting to me because I finally hit a point not too long ago in my personal journey where I realized that of all the healing I'd gone through and all the good stuff that had happened and all the work that I'd done and all the effort and the desire I put into being happy and being a present, like happy person. I realized, this is just a few months ago. Once again, this goes back to plant medicine stuff because I'm kind of crazy about that. Another story. But I realized that in addition to things like anxiety, depression, whatever, worry, this and that, there's also a couple of other feelings, I guess, that don't really get discussed as much, and those are guilt and shame. And I know we've mentioned guilt.
Oh, sure.
We've mentioned guilt a couple of times in this podcast, but I found like just these heavy remnants of guilt and shame. It's like, okay, I've moved through all the crap. I've made it through the dark night of the soul. I'm happy now. I'm able to, provide for myself and be happy and peaceful and smile at people when I go to Walmart and shit like that. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I've never really dove headfirst into the, all the guilt and shame that all of the stuff had for me. What do those words mean for you, man?
Well, there was a lot of guilt and shame, and now there isn't.
It's all
gone. I don't know if I can say it's all gone. It feels like it is. Maybe not. Shame is gone. Okay. Guilt, I do look back at certain things that I did in my past or said or done, and I think the guilt is still there, but I recognize it in a different lens nowadays. Okay. I now give myself permission to accept it and say, it's okay. Yes. You fucked up like everybody else. You made a mistake. And if this person doesn't like you because of what you did, there's nothing you can do about that. So I can't control it. And that was a big thing. I didn't even talk about that, this idea of letting go. Which
I was actually going to get to the word forgiveness after that, but you can talk about letting go. I mean, there's a lot. They're very similar.
It's the same thing. Yeah. I mean, and again, it's a lot of my friends who grew up religious. They know a lot of these concepts. Blessings, gratitude, letting go, God. I get that now. But no, I think forgiveness is exactly it. I forgave myself for being human and making mistakes, for being blind and an insecure person who had a lot of anger and was pretty unhealthy, didn't have a healthy outlook on life, living in oneself. So It's okay. I made mistakes, and that happens, and that there's something so freeing about. And that's why I have that reflections page in the journal. That gives me the opportunity just to reflect and say, today I did think about this episode 15 years ago. I have a lot of shame or a lot of guilt, whatever those feelings are, but it's okay. That's normal. It's healthy. And the people that you hurt have also hurt people. I'm not justifying it by any means, but I'm just simply rationalizing that in my mind that's part of this journey, that we're all going to make these mistakes, and we're all going to, in AA, you've got making amends. And I think there's something beautiful about making amends, like reaching out to those people, if they're ready, if they're willing, if they're accepting, and saying, hey, I did this and I'm really sorry. I feel terrible. And there's something so much, it's so healing when that person can say, yeah, you hurt me, but I forgive you. Right. Or while we moved on. And I mean, and the key there is to not go in with expectations and to really kind of look inside and say, why are you doing this? Right? Why are you asking for forgiveness? Are you doing it for the right reasons? So again, it all comes down to just being completely authentic and honest and vulnerable.
What I find
is huge.
If you go through that process and you put yourself in the situation where you're having to confront all the people that you may have harmed in big ways and small ways and stuff, what you're still left with, you're still left with finding forgiveness for yourself, which I think is like the most challenging stuff. Because I mean, there's no way yourself just doesn't reply back and go, "Okay, cool, man, accept it," and give you a big hug. You know, so it's kind of something that it's more difficult to get closure on. But we tend to look externally, and realize, and it's important to realize that like that kind of love, that kind of forgiveness, like if it starts at home, like if you can bring that stuff inward, and it really can affect everything else. So.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, it's a game changer when you have the ability to give yourself a pass for what you've done and to accept it and to love who you are, which is so hard for me, was so hard for me. Yeah. And there's no doubt there's still moments where, I mean, look, in this podcast, right? I'm sure we'll end the podcast and I'm going to go in my car and I'm going to go, oh, did I say the wrong thing? Did I?
Oh, I forgot to mention that.
I should have said this. I should have done that. And now I'm going to tell Freddie, shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up,
You did the best
Freddie.
you could at the moment. You were as honest and authentic as you possibly could be. I had no agenda. Did I plug Pockitudes too much? Not enough. I mean, all these, right? I mean, that's just the reality. I think, and again, I'm allowing myself to be human and say, it's okay. You did the best you could. If you feel, and in the end, I'm like, okay, I think I gave what I came to give, which was my best version of myself at this very moment. And maybe if we did this in a week, it would have been a different, authentic version of myself. And that's okay. I'm human.
Hey, last question for you.
Yep.
What do you see as being the impact that you want to have on the world?
Well, impact on the world. I think for me, it's more about my impact on a person, right? So I think on the world, it'd be it's too big for me to comprehend. Okay. But I think one person at a time, like for every person I interact with.
That's the world.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But right. I guess we're all connected. So there you go.
Impact them in what way?
Well, again, just give them, be a listener, be present, take yourself out of it, take your ego out of it. Cool. Respond with authenticity and honesty, be vulnerable, have empathy, be mindful with them. I mean, all those buzzwords that are floating around everywhere now, there's a reason they're around. There's actual meaning behind them. And, utilize all of that to be a present person. And if someone comes to me and says, hey, I love your video, your story, I read whatever, blah, blah, blah. I deal with anxiety. I want to be present to talk to them about it and to share whatever story I have to share and say, here's what worked for me. And most importantly, not try to solve it. Like I don't want to be that guy, that person that says, okay, follow these 15 steps and you'll be healed. My wife taught me, this is one of the best lessons, was just share your story. Right. And if it connects and they ask more questions, then just share that. Don't fix it. So I think being present and having empathy.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, man. Well, let's wrap it up, Mr. Fred.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for coming on today. Check it out, people. It's Pockitudes.com. And thanks for tuning in to Redesigning Reality. My name is Dylan Charles. You can check us out, redesigningreality.com. Find us on YouTube, Facebook. I think we have an Instagram page that we don't use, but we're on all the podcasting, iTunes, Google, Stitcher, and all that kind of stuff. But Fred, I really appreciate your time, man, and thanks for coming on and honoring this important personal truth here today with me, man.
Oh, man, you're very welcome. It was an absolute privilege talking to you.
Super, my friend, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
You've been listening to Redesigning Reality with Jeff Anthony and Dylan Charles.
Tukabanya mokabogi.